I was born in '91, and I still remember when my dad brought home our first desktop PC. This was around '95, and I believe it had roughly like 10 or 20 megabytes of memory. And in the closet, we had this gigantic storage of floppy disks. And some of my first gaming experiences was through, yes, I'm that old, floppy disk gaming. Commander Keen Goodbye Galaxy was one of the games I played along with Duke Nukem. I don't know if you realized that Duke Nukem was actually a side-scroller back in the early 90s, Duke Nukem 1 and 2. I was absolutely obsessed with Duke Nukem, mainly because I could shoot things and kill things. And as young as I can remember, I've always liked video games with guns. This was the same era where people don't experience, the whole dial-up. John, Dan, get off the computer! I need to do a phone call! There's this constant tug of war between my brother and me wanting to use the computer connected to the internet, and the unforgettable sound that was always associated with dial-up. And one of the worst parts of having dial-up back in the day, and people nowadays don't experience this, that, people are born in 2000 that are now 21 years of age. Nobody experiences the actual pain, the suffering of loading a naughty photo through the internet and having it load frame by frame, and by the time it's even halfway through, you've already gone, woo! You don't even know if it's loading her face, the tit. It's loading something. You can see pixelated skin, it's still loading, but you already did your duty really fast. Dial-up was a pain. You wanna complain about how bad your internet is with Comcast or Cox or whatever internet you have? Try dial-up, bitch. That was true suffering in the 90s, if you know what I'm saying. One of my first PC ROM games was Virtual Fighter. I remember my mom was really upset that you could be a woman and you could be a man, and as a woman you could punch the man and the man could punch the woman, and for some strange reason my mom thought that Virtual Fighter was going to cause me to think that women are just punching bags, which she meant well. But back in the 90s, there was a lot of stigma around video games. I grew up primarily in Covington, Washington, the first 5 years of my life. It wasn't until '96 that my dad did one of the most incredible things that he's ever done in his history of being my dad. To my surprise, to me and my brother, he brought home a Nintendo 64, and I believe this was summer of '96. And I was shocked. My brother was shocked. But my mom, she was angry. My mom went into full damn witch mode. Honey, how could you do this? Video games are such a waste of time. You're gonna corrupt our children. We don't want this console in here. It's a waste of time. It does nothing for them. It causes them to be violent. It's a bad influence. Daniel's going to be crazy when he grows up. He's too young to be playing GoldenEye 007. My mom threw a fit, and my dad got I don't even want to know how long he didn't get laid for. But what I do know is that there was so much pressure from my mom towards my dad, is that my dad gave up. Instead of my dad taking the console back, my dad gave my mom full power of attorney, power of control over the N64, and gave the console to my mom, so my mom would use that as leniency, leverage, to get me and my brother to do whatever she wanted us to do, just so we could have roughly 10 to 20 minutes to play on our console. My mom was evil in that sense. She knew exactly what she was doing, because you have two young boys who love video games, who want to play video games, and why not use that to your advantage and make them slave around and do whatever you want for whatever reason, because you can, and they will do it because they want to play those video games. I mean, realistically, it's not a bad thought process. It motivated me. It worked. Everything was done that she wanted. All for 20 minutes of time, but hey, you know what? Parents can be parents sometimes. The most frustrating thing about that situation was the fact that I had to actually go to my friend's house, Dallas, down the street, just to play GoldenEye 007, because for some strange reason my mom thought that me playing GoldenEye 007 was going to cause me to be violent. Well, she was wrong about the violent part. I definitely have a knack for violence in video games. I love guns. I love first-person shooters. That is where I kind of grew up on, and has stuck with me for the last 2 decades. Eventually, we move out of that house in Covington, Washington, and we move into this wonderful, beautiful house, which I still wish we had, in Renton with an acre of land, wonderful woods in the background. And I remember being 6 years old, and I don't remember really the instance of how this happened. I just know that it did happen, and I do remember parts of it. And somehow, some way, my mom asked me a question. She sat me down, she's like, Daniel, you haven't been acting very nice today. You've been acting very rude and disrespectful. Have you ever thought about what would happen if you were to pass away? And, you know, as a 7-year-old, I was like, not really. And she explained to me the concept. This was really the first concept I understood. I had been taught this in Sunday school, but it really never resonated with me. But my mom spoke to me. She's like, well, you know, when you die, and if you're not a Christian, and if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you're gonna burn eternity in hell. And I don't know, at 6, 7 years old, when you think of the concept of hell, it's really scary. You think of like demonic demons coming up from the ground and pulling you in and you're suffering. The word that always got me as a kid was eternity, you know, forever. You're going to die one day and you're going to suffer in hell for eternity, forever, and you'll just be suffering in pain. Like, to a kid, the imagination, the visual that I created in my head was far more scary than what my mom was, you know, describing. And it was right then and there that I accepted Jesus into my life, and I became a Christian. It was then for almost the next 15 years that this would shape kind of my foundation of my beliefs and my life. Things I thought about the world, people, beliefs, social issues, just everything. Because this environment that I grew up with, the church, was a Southern Baptist evangelical fundamentalist church. And when I say fundamentalists, I mean that some of the teachings that they had were very, very, very destructive. And even now, at 29 years of age, I am still working through and deconstructing. And it's a long process to deconvert and break everything that you were taught subconsciously. But we'll get into that later. So I became a Christian, right? And I took that shit seriously for almost 13 years, 14 years, I took it really, really seriously. And I was that kid that anytime there was an issue or I was upset or hurt, I would get on my knees, I would pray to God, help me with my confidence, help me with me speak better, help me to interact, help me to do school, help me to make my parents happy, help me to blah, 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 blah. You know the whole spiel. But I remember the first time I questioned things that I was believing, and this was around 12, 13, 14 years of age. And the questions actually stem from what happened to my dad at the time, and I haven't really ever spoken about this publicly, but my dad was contracted, I don't know how you even get this, but my dad got a extremely rare disease known as PRP. Now, I can't even say the whole word. That's how you say it. I don't know. It's a really long word. It's a type of disease of the skin. And I remember being 13, 14, and I just asking myself, like, why my dad, you know? My dad is he has done a few pastoring lectures for the church. He has taught hymns. He's taught the whole music team at the church. Like, why is my dad going through this extremely painful skin disease in which my dad is literally, when he sits down, his skin is flaking by the cups? Not an exaggeration. His skin is just flaking off. His skin and hands and feet. Here's a photo of his foot. Like, everything's doubled and cracked. His skin's all inflamed. He's all red. My dad had to sleep in plastic with like oils and stuff. It was a really stressful time for our family because for me specifically, I couldn't understand like why my dad was going through this. Why my dad's a man of God. He loves Jesus. He loves Christ. He loves the church. Why is this happening to my dad? Now, as a young teen, and even when I was younger, I was always taught this main point that God will allow and cause things to happen to make you stronger. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you go through. It doesn't matter what loss it is. It doesn't matter how screwed up it is. God will use that experience. God is using that experience to make you stronger, a better Christian, and it will bring you closer to Him on a personal level. This was something that was taught from as long as I can remember, that any bad things that happen to you, God is allowing it to happen to make you stronger. Rawr. Now, as a kid, like, in retrospect, I think about that, and I'm like, yeah, I can see how a kid would believe into that. But as I gotten older, the more I realize is that this is fucked up. Some of the things that I went through, no, God didn't use that to make me stronger. You know, it was supposed to bring me closer to God. It didn't do that. It actually it separated me. It made me question things more and doubt things more and ask more questions and really doubt everything that I believed in. My dad having this rare skin disease was attributed to part of my questioning, and there was no cure for this skin disease. And eventually, all of a sudden, because my dad went to the church and they did like one of those oil pray things where everybody around the church congregation puts like their hands around him and prays for him that God will heal him and all that stuff. And I remember several months later that the skin disease just stopped on my dad, like just completely stopped for no reason. And I remember as a 19, I contributed this to, well, God answered our prayers. He stopped my dad going through this excruciating skin disease. God is real. God is love. God is powerful, the whole... I did the most common thing to where, like, if somebody is going through something really horrific, like a cancer or something, and the doctors are helping them through chemo or whatever, and the doctors are helping them, giving the chemo treatment, but instead of actually contributing, the doctors doing the work and helping you through this chemo treatment for cancer, they say, well, it was actually God's doing, It wasn't the doctors that helped my dad, it was actually God. That's what I did. Like, that's still common to this day, where people attribute healing or something good happening. Well, it wasn't the people who healed him and tried to help him, the doctors, it was God. I don't know why you just can't say it was the doctors and God. Why did you always have to exclude the people who are actually helping you, I don't know, it's just a weird thing. One of the hardest things about being a teenager in the Southern Baptist Evangelical Fundamentalist Church is that because of the way that you're taught in that environment, because I believe that you're a product of your environment, if you're taught certain ways to think and behave, then that's going to be instilled in your head, and if you break from that, it's going to take a lot of work to disassociate those negative beliefs or wrong beliefs or whatever about the world. And one of the most frustrating aspects of growing up is, even now, if you look at my YouTube channel, and you look at my old videos when I converted out of religion at 19, which was pretty late, you go back when I was 15, 16 years old on this platform, and there's a lot of things that I'm embarrassed by, humiliated by, primarily because I've said things that don't reflect who I am, or things that I even really believe. But some of the main teachings of my church was that a woman showing her ankle was considered too much skin, and that was sinful. There's this one particular lady, I will always remember her name. Anytime a new person would come into our church, like a guest, she would walk up to them and tell them what was wrong with their either clothing or that they were showing too much skin. It's crazy to me that the church was such a judgmental place, because I believe a church overall, if a real church, should be about accepting and loving everybody and giving them a place to, stay and feel loved and cared for. But there are still a lot of churches that don't do that. They are not accepting of anybody who comes in, at least the church that I grew up in. And it was just really difficult to watch people be so heavily judged and made to feel like shit, simply because of their clothing or because they didn't look or dress a certain way. Hated that. Who are you to tell somebody that they can't wear a dress and show their goddamn ankle? Like, holy fuck, man, come on. It wasn't until later in life when I was 15, 16, where I experienced sexual assault in the church. And I would say this was really the experience that shaped my life in terms of, like, doubting and questioning everything I once believed, because of the response that I was received from this incident and how people tried to help me, and it wasn't helpful. Like, I remember going to a Christian counselor, somebody in the church, an elder, and I specifically asked him, and I was very vague. I'm like, so what happens if, like, there is assault in the church and they do something horrible to you? Is like, what's going to happen to the person who did that horrible thing to you, right? And I was met with, well, they're going to burn in hell if they don't repent, and that experience that happened to you or whoever was hurt or harmed through whatever act of violence or violation that there is, God's going to use this as a experience to make you grow closer to Him, to be a better Christian. And it was at that moment where it just like clicked in my head. I'm like, no, you're not going to tell me that being sexually assaulted is somehow God is using this experience to make me a better Christian. Like, what the fuck? That's fucked up, motherfucker. Why would you say that to anyone? That is some of the most, it is degrading. And at this point, I was also dealing with shame and guilt, suppression and repression. Because again, taking into account of how I was raised, I was really straight edge. I didn't do drinking. I was like, no kissing before marriage, no touching before marriage, no doing any of these things. So when that happened to me, it was riveting to my self-confidence and I thought I was this terrible person for a crime that was committed on me, and I was innocent. Completely, utterly innocent. I had innocence stole from me that would otherwise go to somebody in the near future, that I didn't have that opportunity. And it really screwed me up. Now you have to take into account is how I was raised. I was raised around a lot of horrific things. And by horrific, I mean beliefs and worldviews. And just to express a few things, one of the things that I was taught growing up in the church was that trans people are not trans. I was taught that people who are trans are predators, and that people who are trans and gay only want to prey on children. Those are things that I was taught, okay? Religiously. It was ingrained into my head from as long as I can remember. I think the worst thing of all is how I was taught that unisex bathrooms, when that became a thing in I think it was around 2008, maybe 2005. I don't actually remember. Whatever, I remember in Washington State, we had some of the first unisex bathrooms, and I remember it was a really big contention at my church, and it was constantly talked about. It's well, those people who are trans and gay, they're gonna go in those unisex bathrooms and they're gonna try to look under the stall and look at little kids. I'm not joking. This is what I was taught. I was taught this. It's horrific. It's disgusting. It's wrong. But I am being told this every single week. My peers around me are falling into this category of trans people, gay people, blah, 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 blah. So when I converted out of religion at 19, right, I took all of these things with me. And even though I knew I didn't believe in some of them, it's a subconscious, right? Living your life, and for years you're told the same thing about these types of people, you start to believe it. And when I look back at older content of mine, you'll find videos of mine where I am very, very dismissive and I invalidate people who fall into the whole different identities, whether it be they, them pronouns, if you want to identify as pansexual, whatever, bisexual, gay, lesbian, asexual, whether you're a man, whether you're a girl, you're they, them, whatever it is. I made some content when I freshly came out of religion because I was angry and I had been lied to my whole life, and I still subconsciously had these beliefs that was reflected in my content. One of the most common things I get is that people mention, Daniel, well, you said some really horrific things back 5, 6, 7 years ago. You were even dismissive of people who were trans. And I want to say just for the record here that I am so sorry, because those things are not a reflection of who I am, what I represent, and what I believe now. But I don't think people take in consideration is that how I grew up, those subconscious beliefs were ingrained from me from childhood. And when I left religion and came to YouTube and documented my conversion out of it, a lot of those subconscious beliefs were spouted through my YouTube channel because I used my YouTube channel as a venting tool. That's how I even started on YouTube. For those of you who don't know, I started YouTube in 2007. I came to YouTube as a Christian straight-edge little boy wanting to share Jesus and convert people over to Christianity. That's how I came to YouTube. It wasn't because of Onision. I came to YouTube as a Christian with a goal and passion to share the love of Jesus Christ and to share a message of Christianity. And I used it as a venting tool, primarily when I converted out, because that's all I had, because I was ostracized by my peer group in the church, and then rumors started spreading about me in the church because I left everything I believed. And when you abolish everything and say, I'm done with this, I think it was the video I made, on YouTube saying goodbye to religion, I think it was really like the marking. That was the mark where I'm like, dude, I'm done. But even then, I still subconsciously held on to beliefs that I was taught, and that was spouted through my YouTube channel. And those videos are still on my channel today. And I just want to say, for the record, if you ever see those things where I've said some really invalidating stuff and I come across really mean and dismissive, I said these things out of a lack of education. I said these things out of me being naive and the way that I grew up. And while it is not an excuse, it is definitely an explanation as to why I said things that, for the time being, I didn't understand. And now at 29, almost 10 years later, I've been on a journey to find myself and discover myself and really deconstruct every subconscious belief that I've had ingrained in the back of my head, whether I acknowledged it or not, as where did these thoughts come from? Where do these beliefs come from? They came because of the product of my environment. Indoctrination, that is what indoctrination does, which is why when I talk about religion in any facet, I'm really against children being in a religious environment, because I don't think it does them any good, because if they're taught certain things, they're going to take that into their young adolescent teenage years and maybe even into adulthood like me. Thus, they're going to say horrible things and think things that are wrong about the world as a whole and people, right? How we raise the next generation of children and kids and young adults is crucial to dismantling bigotry, sexism, transphobia, all of these things. And don't get me wrong, I still have a very dark sense of humor, an edgy sense of humor, if you will, but so much of how I was raised enforced those things that I just mentioned, especially the whole sexism part. Like, my God, the man is in control. Do you know how much actual abuse that I witnessed from, like, males who are in a family and have kids in my church that controlled everything and pretty much abused their wives and pushed their wives under a thumb? And basically, because in the Southern Baptist Church, it was, you have God, you have the man, then you have the woman. The woman's the last part of that. The woman has to submit to everything that the husband wants and does, and he makes all the decision, controls everything. It's just a really, really toxic, destructive place for abuse to run rampant because they use God as an example, or the church, to justify them doing deplorable things. If there's one place that sexism is really rampant still, it's in religion. And you will never convince me otherwise. But again, I just want to reemphasize, I'm so sorry to anybody who I've ever hurt. I know I'm going to be saying, well, Daniel, you're being a pushover. No. There are things that I've said over the course of the last 7 to 8 years that I don't believe anymore. I believe in trans rights. I believe in equality for everybody. I think everybody should have the right to life, the right to vote, the right to have a job, the right to refer. It doesn't matter what pronoun you refer to. Like, if you go back far enough, you can find me. I fell into the whole category in 2015, 2014 of like, oh, you identify as an attack helicopter? Ha 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 ha. And now I look back and I'm like, Jesus, did I really make that stupid joke? Like, realistically, at the time I thought it was funny, but it was stupid. Like, it wasn't funny. I don't even find the joke funny anymore. And it was just really dismissive and invalidating, and it was mean, you know? There just wasn't any need to do that. And I want to encourage people that growth is so important. I am 29 years old now, and I have this insane desire to learn. Like, I just want to learn. I just want to take everything. I want to learn everything. You know, I consider myself a jack of all trades guy. Like, I want to know how to do everything I possibly can. Education is like one of my biggest passions. And I don't know if you guys have been able to see that in my last few videos, but like, I really enjoy entertaining people, but also educating people on subjects that people may or may not know about. And like, I did that with Gabby Hanna, I did that with the little Tay. I have a passion for education and entertainment. Education is so vitally important, and I feel like the education industry here in America is really, really lacking in terms of the newer generation. People don't know their history, they don't know their presidents, they don't know how the US started, they don't know how Canada started, they don't know how, like, it's so bad, our education system in America. I'm still learning things at 29 years old that I should have learned when I was 20, but I didn't because of how I was raised, and I was so sheltered, and I was homeschooled. I only saw other friends and kids once a week on Sundays and Fridays, 5 days a week at my house, grinding away with homeschool booklets called Alpha Omega, and it was, that stuff affected me. It absolutely did, for better and for worse. Because I think it's important that people who are new to this channel understand my background and don't come in this channel thinking that, oh, this guy's like this flawless, perfect person. I'm not. And I know every once in a while videos get brought up, older videos from 5-6 years ago, even older than that, where people often use those things against me. And I just want to say for the record that, talk to me, ask me. Like, if you want to know what I think about something, you know, ask me, right? Because people change. People's perspectives and people can genuinely, authentically change. And I feel like in the online world, we don't give enough people an opportunity for that to happen. Much less we don't go out of our way to understand the background that some people may have been raised. And that background plays a crucial part in our development as a person into adulthood and can shape the way that we think and believe for the rest of our lives if we don't disengage with those destructive thoughts and beliefs that we were taught and ingrained with and indoctrinated with as a child. So, that's all I wanted to say. I hope this video was entertaining. I hope it was educational and maybe learn a little bit more about me in some personal ways. Thank you so much for watching this video if you watched it all the way through. Hopefully I wasn't too jambly, ranty. I'm going to make another video in the future specifically talking about my church and the things that I experienced firsthand in far more detail. because I got a lot of church stories. A lot's putting it lightly. Peace the rip out.